receptionist looked at me with disdain, not knowing that I own the hotel chain. I'm 36 years old and the owner of a hotel chain that I expanded after my father passed it down to me when I was in my late 20s. I've grown the business into other states and placed my hotels near highways and tourist attractions. I have several managers from different states who run my hotels, and I visit each one of them throughout the year. After my wife recently gave birth to our youngest child, I decided to take my family on a road trip vacation. My wife and I have always preferred driving over flying because she suffers from flight anxiety. I wanted her to relax after her pregnancy, so we decided to take a road trip to the beach in Florida, a place we've always loved visiting. The trip was long, but we didn't get irritated. We had fun with our kids and our newborn. I decided we would stop at my hotels while traveling from state to state so I could spend time with my family while checking in on my properties. That way, I wouldn't have to do it later in a few months. After hours of driving, I thought we could stop at my hotel in Alabama and spend the night there. We arrived at around 3 in the afternoon and headed to the front desk where the receptionists were stationed. The receptionist looked up from her computer, and I could immediately tell by her expression that she was disinterested as she saw us approaching. I asked her if we could have 2 adjoining rooms with a view, if possible, trying to keep a cheerful demeanor despite feeling tired and annoyed from the long drive. Without taking her eyes off the screen, and already with an attitude, she responded, asking if I had a reservation. No, I didn't make a reservation, I admitted. We decided to stop here on a whim, part of the road trip tradition, I added with a chuckle, trying to lighten the mood. Her attitude didn't change, and she let out a huge sigh as her eyes met mine with clear disinterest and a hint of irritation. Well, without a reservation, I can't guarantee anything special. It's peak season, you know. I looked at her and apologized, telling her she was right and that I should have made a reservation. She let out another sigh, shaking her head and muttering something under her breath. I noticed and asked if there was a problem while smiling. Her eyes widened, maybe she was surprised by my question. It seemed like she realized she had let her frustration slip out. But instead of apologizing, she straightened up and said, "It's just that we have a lot of guests coming through, and it's hard to meet everyone's requests without proper planning," she said in a defensive tone. She continued, "And you people decide to come here without any reservation, as if being inconsiderate of the people working here." I was in shock at what I was hearing, but I kept my smile and told her I completely understood. I told her I was doing my best to manage the situation, knowing it was peak season, and that she was probably tired. I understood that it was my mistake not to make a reservation, but I was already being treated very poorly in front of my family. I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed despite the wave of frustration. I felt the interaction had taken a turn for the worse and needed to be handled delicately, especially since my family was beside me. I didn't want to cause a scene. "I appreciate your honesty," I said in a measured tone, "and I apologize for any inconvenience our stop may have caused." I asked if she had any rooms available, and she replied that there was only one room, but it wasn't adjoining and didn't have a view. I told her we'd take it since we had already paid for the hotel. She handed the room card to my wife, and I told her to go ahead with the kids and that I'd catch up with them. As my family started to walk away, I turned back to look at the receptionist, who still seemed disinterested. "You know," I began in a calm voice, "I've been in the hospitality business for quite some time." The receptionist was still staring at her computer, ignoring me and not responding. I couldn't believe it, I had had enough. I stared at her for a moment, feeling the anger rise in my chest. I took a deep breath and decided to hold back. This wasn't the moment to lose my temper. After all, my family was in the room, and I knew my wife didn't need more stress after everything she'd recently gone through. But something inside me wanted to react. This wasn't just about dealing with a rude receptionist. This was about someone who clearly had a habit of looking down on people without knowing who they might be. "You're right," I said, maintaining a controlled but firm tone. "Not planning and not making a reservation was my mistake. But you know, in the hospitality business, the way we treat people is our calling card." She looked up for a second, maybe realizing I wasn't just any guest, but as if by reflex, she went back to looking at her screen, pretending my presence didn't matter. I walked away from the desk and went back to the room, trying to convince myself to let it go. The night went by, and while my family slept, I couldn't. I sat in the armchair by the window, reflecting. I had dedicated my life to building a hotel chain that prided itself on exceptional service. How dare that woman treat any customer like that, let alone the owner of everything? In the morning, I made a decision. My family was excited to continue the trip, and my wife, always kind, suggested we go downstairs for breakfast at the hotel restaurant. We went down together, but before reaching the dining room, I asked them to go ahead, telling them I needed to take care of something. I returned to the front desk. The receptionist was there again, wearing the same expression of disdain as the day before. "Good morning," I began, keeping a polite tone. She didn't even bother to respond, just gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging my presence was an effort. "I'd like to speak with the manager," I said, now more serious. She looked up, crossing her arms. "He's not here right now. Whatever you need, you can tell me." I smiled, but not out of happiness, it was pure irony. "Are you sure about that?" I asked. "Because I think the manager would be very interested in knowing how customers are being treated here." She frowned but said nothing. I felt it was time to reveal my position. I pulled out my business card from my pocket, placed it on the counter, and slid it toward her. "I'm the owner of this hotel, and of the entire chain. I think you might want to reconsider what you just said." Her expression changed immediately. Her previously relaxed posture gave way to visible tension. She picked up the card, read my name, and looked at me, pale. "Sir, I didn't know," she stammered, but I interrupted her. "Of course, you didn't know. But that's exactly the point. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat people with respect." The manager was called immediately. Unlike the receptionist, he was a professional man, visibly concerned about the situation. After a long conversation in his office, I explained everything that had happened and made it clear that this incident could not be ignored. It was a matter of principle. I wanted all employees to understand that respect is the foundation of our brand. The manager assured me that steps would be taken. And before I left, I made it clear that I would be back. I left the hotel feeling like I had done the right thing, but at the same time, something bothered me. I knew that this receptionist wasn't the only one. How many others like her might be harming the experience of our guests? As we continued our journey, that idea kept running through my mind. I realized this wasn't just about a single isolated incident. Maybe it was time to conduct surprise audits at my other hotels. If this was happening at one of my properties, what could be going on at the others? And what if the problem was bigger than I thought? That question echoed in my mind throughout the drive as I looked out the window, watching the changing landscapes. When we finally arrived at the beach, my wife was happy, and my children ran across the sand, but I still couldn't relax. The decision was made. As soon as we finished the trip, I would begin a thorough investigation process at every hotel I own. I knew this might uncover unpleasant truths, but it was necessary. Every customer who walked into one of my hotels deserved to feel valued. And I would not rest until I was sure that was the reality. The week after the incident, I decided to return to the hotel in Alabama, this time alone. My family was safe and relaxed at home, and I needed to give my full attention to resolving what had happened. This wasn't just about that receptionist, it was about the larger impact that kind of behavior could have on the reputation of my hotel chain. Deep down, I knew the problem went beyond a single employee. Something was failing in the management of that location. I arrived at the hotel unannounced, posing as a regular customer this time. I kept a low profile, wanting to observe how the staff interacted with other guests. I sat discreetly in the lobby for hours, observing every detail. It didn't take long to realize that the problem was systemic. The receptionist who had mistreated me wasn't the only one with that attitude. Other employees on that shift displayed the same air of disdain and impatience. I saw how they ignored guests, handled requests carelessly, and even made comments that bordered on sarcasm. As I took mental notes of everything, the manager finally appeared, a middle-aged man in a slightly rumpled suit with a forced smile as he greeted some guests who seemed more important. He walked right past me without noticing, too busy checking something on his phone. That confirmed my suspicions. The problem started at the top. The next day, I called a meeting with the entire hotel staff. At first, no one knew who I was, but as I introduced myself, I saw the astonishment on many faces. The manager, in particular, looked visibly uncomfortable, nervously adjusting his tie as I spoke. "I'm here because what happened last week was unacceptable," I began in a calm but firm tone. The behavior I experienced, and what I observed yesterday, does not reflect the values of our brand. Every guest who walks through these doors must be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of who they are or what they've done. I looked directly at the receptionist who had treated me poorly. She was sitting at the back, avoiding my gaze. I continued, turning toward the manager. I want to make it clear that although each individual is responsible for their actions, the failure of a system reflects directly on its leadership. The room fell silent. Some employees exchanged uncertain glances, while others seemed distrustful. As manager, you are responsible for the training, supervision, and example you set for this team. What I witnessed yesterday and experienced as a customer proves that leadership has been lacking. I turned fully toward the manager. He tried to interrupt me, but I raised my hand to stop him. As of today, you are no longer part of this team, I announced. His expression shifted from surprise to outrage. Sir, with all due respect, I don't think this is fair, he began. I have years of experience. And experience without commitment to the right values means nothing, I interrupted firmly. I'm not here to compromise the quality of what I've worked so hard to build. The manager stood, still trying to argue, but I gave him no room. He walked out of the room, muttering something about loyalty and injustice. Once the door closed, I addressed the rest of the staff. I know some decisions are hard to accept. But I'm not here to please anyone. I'm here to make sure this hotel is a place where every guest feels welcome and valued. My gaze rested on the receptionist. And as for you, I said, pointing at her directly, your attitude was the most blatant. You had the chance to redeem yourself when you learned who I was, but you chose to continue your disrespect. That's something I cannot tolerate. As of now, you are also dismissed. She turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She quietly gathered her things and left. After both had gone, the atmosphere in the room was tense. Many employees looked uncomfortable, and some even murmured among themselves. One of them, a bit bolder, stood up and said, with all due respect, "Sir, this seems extreme." They were good at their jobs. I took a deep breath before responding. Good employees are not just those who complete their tasks. They are those who do so with respect, empathy, and professionalism. If anyone here thinks what you saw from them is acceptable, then maybe this is not the right place for you either. The room went silent again. In the days that followed, I implemented immediate changes. I brought in a new manager from another hotel in the chain, someone I trusted to restore the culture of respect and excellence that should have always existed there. I also organized mandatory training sessions for all staff, making it clear that the behavior I had witnessed would never be tolerated again. Despite some initial resistance, many employees began to notice the improvements. Guests started to comment on the more welcoming atmosphere, and the hotel's reviews began to improve. However, I knew the work was far from over. There were other hotels to audit, and each one could be hiding similar problems. I left the hotel in Alabama feeling that I had fulfilled my duty, but with the certainty that this was just the tip of the iceberg. The next step would be to visit another state, another hotel, and continue making sure that the values I had fought so hard for were being upheld. I knew this battle would be long, but I was prepared to face whatever was necessary. In the end, what was at stake wasn't just my reputation, it was the very essence of what I had built.